to thank you for viewing this video. It is October 22nd, 2019, and in a couple of weeks there's going to be a city council election in Council Bluffs, Iowa. There are 6 seats open, and I'm sorry, let me start over again. Take 2. Thanks for tuning into this broadcast. My name is Brian Jack Holder, and I'm the Libertarian Party candidate for Iowa's 3rd Congressional District. I've run for this congressional district 3 times before, and I'm running again next year for a 4th time. But tonight I filmed a city council candidate forum put on by the Council Bluffs Downtown Neighborhood Association, and they had it at the public library tonight. It's October 22nd, 2019, and there's a city election in a couple of weeks on November 5th. They had a primary a few weeks ago, and I believe there were 10 candidates, and 6 advanced to this general election on November 5th, and they'll be voting for 3 city council members in a couple of weeks. So I do not live in the city. I live outside of the city limits, so I'm not going to be voting in this election. But I filmed the forum tonight, and it was a wonderful forum. Everyone participated in it. Everyone was friendly, and it really makes you feel good to be a citizen of Council Bluffs and a citizen of Iowa. So the forum runs about 90 minutes, and I'm editing it now as soon as I put this introduction section on there. If anyone wants to sign my nominating petitions, you can send me an email at bjh12572@gmail.com. My phone number is 402-689-1817. It's Brian Jack Holder is my Facebook page, and I need to get 375 signatures before next March to qualify for the general election ballot next year for the Iowa's 3rd Congressional District. So I want to thank everybody for viewing this video. I want to thank everyone that signed my nominating petitions tonight, and I want everyone to try and get your friends involved in politics, discuss the issues. You know, it's our government, and we have the government that we deserve and we tolerate, but we want to get more people out there involved and more people voting. So thank you for watching, and here's the forum.
You may. Tell people who you are.
My name is Brian Jack Holder. Sorry, I won't talk so loud. A lot of people in here know me. I run for Congress 3 times. I'm running again next year. If anyone wants to sign my petition, I need to get 375 signatures before next March to file my papers to run for the 4th time, just to represent everybody. I'm a member of the Libertarian Party of Iowa, but I'm also a citizen journalist, so I film debates and forums and legislative coffees. This will be on my YouTube channel, and that's Brian Jack Holder, and I'm going to go home tonight, edit this, and have it uploaded. Film at 11 for anyone that wants to watch it. And then I also took some photos of the candidates here, and I'll be giving those to the candidates to use for whatever purposes they want. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming out here tonight, and feel free to share the video once I get it uploaded.
Thank you, Brian.
I put a little grease on the bottom of it, and that works. Yeah.
Usually does stick some bubble gum to it. We're good to go.
Okay, well, if anyone has bubble gum, please put it out. Thank you. I'm trying not to be tardy, folks.
Can everyone hear me? Perfect. Well, it looks like it's 6:30. I'm trying not to be tardy. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. I wanted to let you know that we have Joe Shearer from the Non-Paral. We have Brian Holder here, who's taking still photographs, and he's doing some videotaping. And we also have John Schlicker. Schlicker, thank you. I apologize for that. First, could I have everyone put their cell phones to silent? And then also let you know there is coffee and bottled water at the back of the room. So what I wanted to tell you is, tonight we don't have plans to discuss anything that's already been settled. That means no discussion of city medians on Broadway, things like that. We have no control over that, it's already a done deal. So what we are here to discuss are things that impact our neighborhoods, and especially the neighborhoods around the downtown core. I want to thank, Corey Peters. She's going to be our timekeeper. We will have 3 minutes for the candidates to answer the question once I read it. Turner Morgan couldn't be here this evening, but he was the one who sent out the invitations. They went out to all the neighborhood leaders within the downtown neighborhoods themselves. So we had Canesville-Tinley, the Bayless neighborhood, the Gibraltar neighborhood, the Lincoln Fairview neighborhood, the Lincoln Dell neighborhood, and the Fairmount Park Neighborhood Association. My name is Michelle Muchler Burns. Professionally, I'm a registered nurse and certified case manager. Personally, I'm the president of the Fairmount Park Neighborhood Association, and I have a passion for nonprofits. We want to remind the city council candidates, the incumbents and the candidates themselves, that they're elected to serve the city and the residents of Council Bluffs, and they should be acting on our behalf and not their own. So I'd first like the candidates to please introduce themselves. You'll have 3 minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself. Please mention if you live in an organized neighborhood, which would be like Fairmount Park neighborhood or any of those others that were mentioned. Again, some people might live in the North Broadway neighborhood, and that's fine. We weren't able to invite all the neighborhoods just because of the size of this venue, as you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Joe. Since you're the closest, I'll pick on you first.
Sure.
We'll have 3 minutes. Let me explain just a little bit with Corey and the timekeeping. So she'll put up a green when it's a go time. When you have 30 seconds remaining, she'll hold up yellow. And then red, of course, that's stop, you're done. And a couple of these questions that we are going to go over have 2 parts, and I will let you know if there are 2 parts to the question. But of course, your introduction, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe DeSalvo. I'm running for City Council. I'm from Council Bluffs. I've lived here all my life. I am the Vice President of the Eagle Trail Homeowners Association. Prior to that, I lived off North 8th Street, so I wasn't part of that. But we, in our association, we meet once a year officially, and then if something else comes up, we have to get together and discuss anything. Would be nice to kind of be included with some of this. Being we're on the outskirts, I understand the need for time and space. But I went to Abraham Lincoln High School. I graduated from there. I went off to college. That was the only time I moved away from town. And then I moved back because I wanted to be here. You know, Council Bluffs is where I'm from. It's where my family's from. You know, my folks are here. My aunts, uncles, grandparents, everyone else that I've known most of my life are all from this area. So this area is very important to me. You know, there's folks that live in Council Bluffs that have moved in, and not that they don't find it important, but the roots kind of run deep in my family here. So when I got done with college, I took a job at the banks here in town because finding work was kind of a rough go. I've done that, and from there I've kind of moved on from one thing or the other, kind of a jack of all trades. I've worked in banking, I've worked in finance briefly, I'm in insurance now, and at the same time I've always worked as a side job in the service industry. With my wife and her cousins, we own a small business here in town, so we employ a handful of folks here. We deal with that. You know, as I said a couple other nights ago, everything we do, we need to keep in mind, as you said, that we are all residents of Council Bluffs, but everyone here is our neighbor. So we need to do what's best, not only for ourselves, but for them as well. So, for the most part, that is where I came from. And where I'd like to go is, again, I'd like to see more cohesiveness with some of the other neighborhoods in town, not just, you guys have a really nice federation or conglomeration, whatever you want to call it, of neighborhoods. It would be nice to work with. Some of us on the periphery, and that's a two-way street, part of that's on us as well. I'd be more than happy to, you know, facilitate some of that. With that, I'll turn it over to Deb, and I thank you guys, and I would appreciate a vote on the fifth.
We still have 30, Roger. This is just the warning. So if there's anything else you want to say,
I'm Joe.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, that's okay.
She can't see your table tip.
Right there on your tag. I can't read that. My apologies.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. It's good to see a full room tonight. I'm Deb Bass, and I too am a candidate for City Council, and I'm very excited to be here tonight to talk to you. First of all, I have a very interesting career path. I came to Council Bluffs in 1971 when I started school at Jenny Edmondson. I'm a registered nurse. But I always had an inkling for business as well. I worked at the hospital in surgery and labor and delivery for 11 years, and during that time frame went back to college. My degree is in healthcare administration. Prior to that, Y2K was big in the landscape, so started a consulting company, an IT consulting company called Bass & Associates, Inc. Sold that in 2001 to Huntel. I stayed on there for a couple of years under contract, and then was approached by a group of individuals that wanted to start a health information exchange for the state of Nebraska. And it's called NEHI, the Nebraska Health Information Exchange, and that has now gone on to be a very successful entity as well. During that time frame, though, I have always lived in Council Bluffs, except for a period of time when I moved out to Carson to be closer to grandparents, but I've always lived in Pottawatomie County. And I've always been very committed to serving the communities in which I live. I have a long-standing resume of the boards that I've served on, and the different projects that I've been involved in as a professional and as a community volunteer. I currently am on a number of hospital boards. I am the secretary for the Methodist Health System. I'm on Jenny Edmondson. I'm on Methodist Hospital Board, the VNA Board. I'm also still on the Council Bluffs Convention and Visitors Board. Mayor Hannafin contacted me in 2012 when they wanted to break that off and make that a separate entity. And it is still alive and well and doing very well today. So I bring that experience to the table. I am retired, a little over a year, so I've approached this as a full-time job. I've spent since May preparing for this. I've met with department heads, city leaders, visionaries, anyone that's wanted to talk to me about what they want to see and have happen in Council Bluffs. I've also spent quite a bit of time canvassing neighborhoods. Just this last weekend, I think we totaled, I was out again today up and down Lincoln, and we're close to 25 hours just over the last week. So, but I love doing that because I love to talk to people. And I want to give a shout out to the Lincoln Avenue neighborhood. Most people knew the election was November 5th and they were planning to vote. So let's hear it for Lincoln. So with that, I will bring my experience to the table. I very much want to serve Council Bluffs, and I know that the others are going to talk about this, but Nate, Sharon, and I have come together and we will devote $5,000 of the salary. The council's getting a raise in January, and we want to take those dollars and dedicate that to a neighborhood association grant. So the yellow card's up, now the red. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening. I'm Councilmember Nate Watson, and I was born and raised in the area. Went away to school, was trained as a historian and a political scientist, and then got my doctorate in the law and a postdoctorate in legislative practice, which is the study of how legislatures work and pass laws. In that time, I interned in the U.S. House of Representatives, the British Parliament, the Iowa Senate, and the Iowa Ethics and Campaign Disclosure Board. Was involved in many campaigns, both state and national, as well as local. After school, I moved back to help raise my niece. She's 16, and I still help raise her along with my mother, her grandmother, in the area. And I took a job at a local firm, mostly working in insurance law the first several years, and also represented a lot of smaller towns, the largest being Carter Lake. And in my work, I really wanted to get back to why I had become a lawyer, so I started to work with different neighborhood groups and helped co-found my own neighborhood along with Michelle Muchler Burns, Fairmont Park, and founded the Downtown Neighborhood Alliance, and at the end of the day helped start or restart 16 of the neighborhoods in our community. Through that process, then eventually I actually took a year away and left private practice of law to head the neighborhoods effort full time. At that point, it was struggling, the particular organization I was trying to save. It wasn't able to end up saving it, but I have no regrets. It was truly a great effort, and the neighborhood effort continues in spite of its closure. Then I took a job in the public sector in my day job. I was Nebraska Medicaid's attorney for about 4 years, and I'm now the deputy director of Nebraska Medicaid, so I'm responsible for about 800 employees, and I have to manage an annual budget of $2.1 billion. And in that, I work in a lot of medical professionals, a lot of lawyers, a lot of data and analytics people, as we work to provide health care to very poor children, disabled and elderly people, about 250,000. My time on the council has been spent really trying to bring best practice to our community. I've updated our council rules of procedure the first time since the war, World War II, that is. And right now I'm currently in the process of rewriting all of our regs, our ordinances rather. We rewrote, Sharon White and I rewrote the housing chapter entirely to put in place about 24 business-friendly provisions along with active rental inspections. I want to do that over another term where I go through for the first time since 1853, I looked, to rewrite our laws. A lot of them are old red tape. They're written in 19th century English. And I think they ought to be updated and ought to be relevant. And that's a particular skill that I can bring along with what I bring from my neighborhood's background. And I ask for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. I'm Chad Hannon. Like everyone else up here, I'm a candidate for City Council. Fifth generation Council Bluffs resident, St. Albert graduate, and I attended Iowa Western after that. My wife, who's my high school sweetheart, also a St. Albert graduate. We have 3 kids together, 8, 5, and 3. Why I'm running here, or actually I should answer your question first. I belong to a neighborhood association. I live in Forest Glen. We do have a homeowners association, but we do not have a formal neighborhood association. Something I think that our neighborhood could definitely benefit from. My community experience includes serving on the 712 Initiative Board of Directors as one of the founding members. With Nate's help, many years ago when he was at the Neighborhood Association, we worked in partnership, Bluffs Downtown and Nate's neighborhood organization, really as he was working to get that grassroots effort off the ground. As Nate indicated, it didn't work out, and he put a significant amount of time behind that. 712 kind of picked it up, but not necessarily at the same level. And we're very fortunate to have someone like Turner Morgan leading the charge for the 712 initiative and helping grow not only the neighborhood associations, but the cohesiveness in between neighborhoods as well. Some of the things that 712 has brought forward for neighborhoods are things like the block party trailer, which I'm sure many of you have had the opportunity to utilize. What that's done is it's provided everything you need to have for a block party inside of your neighborhood for a $50 refundable deposit. As long as you bring the trailer back and the contents, you get your $50 back. We also work with you in the city to help close down the street, coordinate fire, EMS, and police to come up and meet kids and neighbors and help grow all around relationships. And really that's what I'm hoping to achieve on the city council, is to help build relationships around the community, not only amongst the city and the county, but also amongst council members and with the mayor and things like that. My other board experience, I also serve on the executive board for the Council Bluffs Chamber of Commerce. I'm currently the secretary. Small business is a passion of mine. My grandfather was the president of the Chamber of Commerce in 1971, something that I hope to follow in his footsteps. If that's presented to me. Very proud of the business community in Council Bluffs and what they've done. Would like to help see that grow. And sorry, that totally threw me for a loop. I'm not used to this yet. I'm not a career politician, as you can hear. I don't even know how to close that. But my time is almost up. Thank you for coming. I know that there's a lot that anybody can be doing right now, and I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you educating yourself on the candidates and where we stand on things, and I would appreciate your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sharon White, and I currently serve on the Council of City Council. I'm in my 9th year on the council, and the reason for the odd number is I was appointed to serve a vacant 1-year term. So instead of 8 years, I'm in my 9th year. I live in the Lincoln Fairview neighborhood. When I graduated from high school, I moved to Florida and met my husband, and he's a very kind man, and he brought me home. He said it was cheaper to bring me home than to pay the telephone bills. So that was free cell phones. And immediately got immersed into the community. I took a job at the Board of Realtors as their executive officer, and I worked there for about 7 years, and then went into appraising. All of my background is in real estate, and I worked with Kessler, McGivern and Associates for about 17 years. And then I opened my own company, so I am a small business owner, and that has been a very good move for me. I've really enjoyed that. I've been involved with the neighborhood, in my neighborhood association, but not just that. I've been involved with the Canesville-Tinley neighborhood over the years. I was their liaison for quite some time, and that neighborhood put so much effort in, and it was really difficult because they had fewer homeowners, they had a lot more tenants, and they were even able to get the tenants to come to those meetings. And they were quite successful. I think they're still successful today. I currently serve on Advanced Southwest Iowa, which is the Economic Development Committee for the City of Council Bluffs and Potawatomi County. I was one of the founding members of that and helped develop that corporation. And just in the last 4 years, that corporation has been responsible for $124 million in economic development in Council Bluffs and Potawatomi County. We work every day, that committee, along with our CEO, which is Paula Hazelwood, to make sure that we are able to bring in companies and provide jobs, and we are always targeting high-wage jobs. The thing that's most important to this community is not minimum wage jobs. It's high-paying jobs, living wage jobs, and that's what we work on all the time. I also serve on the Children's Square Board. That is another passion of mine, is the children in the community, and I'm serving in my 6th year on that board. And Children's Square is really an icon in our community. I think it's probably, in some ways, touched everybody's lives, or they know somebody from there. As far as neighborhood associations and what I will continue to do and work for the neighborhood associations, one of my key things that I want to do, if I were elected to serve again, is work on the revitalization of our urban core and try to put money into the housing that has fallen into disrepair. And we need to find ways to direct some of our funding back into those neighborhoods. And I do appreciate the neighborhoods having us here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for putting this on tonight. Thank you everybody for coming. My name is Roger Sandow. I'm up for re-election. I'm running again for many reasons, but a couple because I truly believe I'm up here to be the voice of the citizens and the businesses of this community. I ran my campaign in 2015 on investing in our youth, and since then I've become a mentor with teammates. I have a 6th grader. I was at Kern today, right around the time school got out. It's kind of a mess down there, but it was interesting. The kids are fun to be around. I want the community to know that they can trust me, and I do my homework. I'll give you a little story about work ethic and how I was raised. In 1985, my family, my mom and my dad and my uncle opened up St. Edward Sign Company here on South Main, where ConAgra's parking lot is now. Well, he was in another spot before that, but that's where he was. But when they opened, he couldn't afford business cards. So he hand wrote them and he cut them up, and he walked around town and gave them to people. And that's how I was raised. That's the work ethic that I bring to the table. You know, I want people to know that in 2015 when I ran, I was kind of hammered for not being. I was 29 years old. I was hammered for not being on boards, not being past president of different things. I'll give you an update. I'm still not the past president. I'm not on any boards. I have recently been asked to be on the Council Bluffs Community School District Master Plan Committee, so I am on that. But I truly believe that I am the voice for the citizens and the businesses, and I ask for your voice, or for your vote on November 5th.
Thank you, everyone. The downtown neighborhoods and downtown core represent some of the most historic and active neighborhoods in Council Bluffs. Within the downtown core are several neighborhoods, and a few are on the National Register of Historic Places, including the Lincoln, Fairview, Gibraltar, Park and Glen historic districts. Fargo Glen is actually the second largest historic district in all of Iowa. Furthermore, we have 2 historic business districts, the Haymarket District and the 100 Block. There is also another proposed historic neighborhood called the South 8th Street Historic District, which lies within the Bayless neighborhood. That one is currently up at the SHPO office, that's the State Historic Preservation Office in Des Moines, and they will be deciding on whether that should be a historic district probably in February. All of this in addition to the active neighborhoods of North Broadway and Haynesville-Tinley. So all of those are around the downtown core. Tonight, I'm pleased to be able to ask questions relevant to vibrant neighborhoods and thriving neighborhoods in friendly business districts. And so what I will do is I will ask a question after I preface it so that you know why I'm asking the question. And we're going to start with Deb because I've already picked on Joe. So we'll just plan to hand the microphone on. So question 1. Many of our residents feel Council Bluffs, and particularly neighborhoods in the downtown core, are being left behind from the economic success seen in the rest of the region and the U.S. The population of neighboring communities is growing, and metro area housing values have increased on pace with the rest of the U.S., while Council Bluffs' population has decreased and housing values are seemingly not rising at all, or extremely sluggish. Our question is, what role do you believe our neighborhoods and business districts play in attracting new employers and homeowners, and how should the City Council work to attract more middle-income families and family wage or high-tech employers, specifically to the downtown core?
First of all, I also forgot to mention, I am a part of the Ridgeview Estates Homeowners Association, and I do attend those neighborhood meetings. I left that out, I apologize. Okay, back to your question, Michelle. Well, first of all, attracting small business, I had several meetings, as I said, with department heads, because I am very interested in small business. And I've heard from other small business individuals that it's a challenge sometime when you're trying to get something started in Council Bluffs, because one person tells you one thing and you think you're already set to go, and then you find something that some permit or some inspection, whatever. So, and I also met with Sue Pitts and talked with her at length, and she's at the Small Business Development Center at Iowa Western. And what I'd like to see, and I'm likening it to what in healthcare we call it the nurse navigator, that when you're diagnosed with a certain condition, you're assigned one person who helps get you through all of the challenges that you face when you're seeking care. Well, a small business owner or a small business entrepreneur that's looking to get something started needs some of that guidance as well. I've heard stories that they're ready to open, and then they find out that they need to get a permit from the state of Iowa, from public health, etc. And so that delays it. And let me tell you, 2 weeks is a long time to a small business person. And that's also why I've commented that I really feel that the council needs to be ready to make decisions when they are given that packet, to review that, have it ready, so that when a vote comes up, that decision is made that night. It is not acceptable to say, I need more time to read this. You need to move that process along. As far as the neighborhoods, we saw a great example of this today when we were walking the Lincoln neighborhood. They're building 2 homes there on the corner of Lincoln, and I'm probably not going to be able to come up with, is it Boers? Yes, thank you. I knew I wasn't going to say that right. We talked to the 2 gentlemen that were working there, and they are also building 3 other homes in another neighborhood. And they were really excited that they could be a part of this project of infill housing in our old neighborhoods and turning something that was an eyesore. This house had been torn down. Also met with Steve Carmichael, I'm waiting for the card to pop up, and talking about the 657A process and what they go through to get those houses demolished. And I think many of us don't understand that if they can't get a hold of the owner of that property, it has to go on public notice for 6 months. And that's why you see boarded up houses that are sitting there that nothing is happening. So, red card is no, what else can I say?
Well, that's a really good question. Thank you, Michelle. I really think in my nearly 8 years on the council, I have been a consistent voice on the council. Often when projects come in front of us, big or small, wherever they are in the community, I've been one of the voices to speak up and say, what do the neighbors think of this? Have the neighbors been told about this? A lot of our processes originally are based on the minimum required by state law, which frankly doesn't require that many people be told anything that's going on directly. And so what I tried to do, initially I tried to do it by informal policy, where broader groups of individuals, and particularly organized neighborhoods, would receive notice of activities that might be proposed, so that they could, number one, know about what their government was intending to perhaps do, and number two, have a real meaningful opportunity to participate in that process. I think a lot of it is and eventually we moved to formalizing those processes so that there's no misunderstanding, that the neighborhoods, particularly as an incentive to neighborhoods to organize together and to come together in a slightly more formal way, that they can know what's going on and have a real voice at the table. The second thing I think is important is not only, as Deb Bass has indicated, the infill. I think it's also our existing rehabilitation of our existing infrastructure is important. I also think as part of that, we need to be sensitive to the existing neighborhoods. Most people, myself included, and I practice what I preach, I believe very much in our neighborhoods. And in my case, what made sense to me was living in an older neighborhood. Maybe not the best financial sense, but it made sense to me in my heart, and that's what I chose to do. And other people do, and they choose to live in their neighborhood for similar sentimental reasons. But nonetheless, it's the largest for most people, including myself. It's my only actual real investment, is my home. And so I think oftentimes in city government in the past, we didn't necessarily look to what the existing folks thought, and we're worried exclusively about what the new folks that might come in thought. Now, make no mistake, I very much believe in growth and economic development, but what the big guy thinks is no more important than the existing little guy already there, including neighborhoods. So I really believe that we need to look to what the neighbors think. I think we look to what neighborhoods, the collections of neighborhoods think, not only the neighborhoods that have come together as an organized group, but the neighborhoods that have come together in an alliance, like the downtown, like I was pleased to create for the downtown neighborhoods, along with an awful lot of help from people in this room and elsewhere. And I really think at the bottom line, it's making sure they have a real seat at the table. And you gotta have people that are willing to give more than lip service to that, and are willing in votes, not to say, I don't care what that neighborhood thinks, particularly a historic one, I just want to see something go in there. I push back against that, including recently, because what the little guy thinks ought to matter, and it does with me.
Thank you. 712 initiative, before that PCDC had a program similar to this for the rehabilitation of buildings for storefront grants. So what they would do is they would take grant money, and there was obviously a match. So whether it was a 50% match, so 712 would provide half of the grant funding, the operator would provide the other half of the funding. What it did though is it allowed a building that oftentimes could have been torn down and made way for something different, and allowed it a second chance at life. And I don't think, it was very effective on the 100 block in South Main, and I would like to see that continue, and it is continuing to this day with 712. But I would like to see something like that for our neighborhoods. So if you do purchase an established home and you would like to restore it back to its previous state, there should be an outlet for that. As Nate mentioned here, that's not cheap, but there's something to be proud of when you do that. My grandparents built a home on Kenmore Avenue before my dad was born. And when my wife and I had a chance 8 years ago to purchase a home on Kenmore Avenue, about 6 down from where my dad grew up, we jumped at it. I will fully admit, just like Nate, we were not prepared for what it takes to own an older home. But the memories that we made in that home and some of the decisions that we made to restore it back to its original state were priceless. And I would like to see more people have the opportunity to do the same as we did. And I think economic development, how do we attract more businesses to town? I think we've all been asked that question quite a bit over the course of this. There is no easy answer. one of the hard things with economic development is who's going to work there. And so one of the things that the Chamber of Commerce has recently shifted their focus to is workforce development. We need to help the folks that are looking for employment or need a hand up to get the training that they need to help fill the jobs that are available right now, which there are many. And so I know that doesn't quite answer your question of how do we attract folks to these historic areas, but I think if we can help the people that need a hand up or they need training to fill the jobs that are open, it will provide more opportunity to move into neighborhoods and make investments into the historic neighborhoods that are available. Thank you.
Well, living in a historic neighborhood and owning a historic home, I'm just gonna really echo what they said. I've spent 26 years now bringing my house back to its former glory, and that investment, of course, is not necessarily gonna come back to me, and it doesn't matter. I feel like you're caretakers of those homes. So each person that owns it, it's their responsibility to care for it, love it, and make it a little bit better. I have a unique perspective because I am a real estate appraiser, and I work Potawatomi County, Douglas County, and Sarpy County. And one of my biggest concerns, and I've always just never understood it, is, you go over to Dundee and those houses that are in neighborhoods just like ours, just like our downtown neighborhoods, and their values are tremendously higher than our neighborhoods will support. And I think there's a lot of different things that go with that. I think we started some of the things that'll make a difference. The 100 block, I think, is a really good start. Dundee has some of that. And you want that walkability. And so the neighborhood associations over the last several years have used grant money to repair sidewalks and do those things to make the neighborhoods more walkable. There is grant money available. I think Nate has used some of that in the past, but there's never enough of it. There's what we get from block grants to help with historic home repairs is it's not going to fill the great need that we have. We have to start looking at money that is spent building workforce housing like the infill housing and see how we can redirect some of that back to developers that are willing to take that on, save those houses. And I think one of the other parts is that once a neighborhood hits this tipping point, I did a lot of research on it. You have to have predominantly homeowners. Renters are fine, rentals are great. But once you've hit that 30% or higher in a neighborhood that is rental, that's where you start seeing that decline. And it's partially because it's transient. They don't have the same pride in ownership because they don't own that property. So a good mix of different housing in a neighborhood is great. But there's this point where you need to try to bring some of those houses that, I've said many times that we do not provide senior housing in our community that the typical person can afford. So I was raised in a blue-collar family, and I can tell you that we are not Primrose people. We need affordable housing for my mom. So seniors stay in their properties well beyond their ability to care for them. And so that's another area you see that slide. So it's kind of a big puzzle we need to put together to make sure that we're protecting our neighborhoods and making them as attractive as some of those neighborhoods in Omaha that have those high values.
Okay, I apologize, I forgot earlier also. I live up on Sims Avenue, and we do not have a formal neighborhood association. We have a Facebook page, People of Eastview, so I'm on the corner of Eastview and Sims. So it's not formal, but we do have a group of people in the neighborhood that are connected through that way. To attract more small businesses, being a small business owner, it's not an easy go. But I think Sue Pitts and the Small Business Development Center out of Iowa Western Community College is definitely underutilized. When it comes to neighborhoods, I'll give you a couple examples of listening to the neighbors for me. Out on College Road, they talked about putting in some apartments. Well, the neighborhood out there wasn't in favor of that at all. And to be honest with you, I wasn't either. And obviously, that's why I voted against it. Another example of listening to neighborhoods is when ConAgra bought those houses down there on 9th Avenue. We listened to the neighborhood association down there when they came and talked to the council, and keeping ConAgra to run with fence with the wrought iron fence and the brick, to keep that kind of buffer and the trees down there in between the neighborhoods and the industrial part of the community. Another example of listening to neighborhoods for me is the business owners on Broadway. That to me is a neighborhood. It's people that are neighbors next to each other, and I feel I listen to them and being the voice for those businesses and communities. A good example of business moving to the downtown is Boxer Barbecue. So they redid that inside that building. It's beautiful. I invite you to go down there. So there's a lot of different things we can do, but listening to the neighbors is definitely one of them.
No, it's my, yeah, okay, so real quick, if you don't mind, 2 questions, right?
This is a one
2.
question.
Well, it seemed like 2 parts. Okay, that's right.
Would you like me to read it again, Joe?
Sure, yes. Would you please, for everyone, so we don't lose sight of it.
It's been a while.
Yes.
What role do you believe our neighborhoods and business districts play in attracting new employers and homeowners? And how should the city council work to attract more middle-income families and family wage or high-tech employers, just specifically the downtown core? It's kind of three-part question.
That's at least 2.
Do you need 6 minutes?
No, that's fine. Okay, just saying. Okay, ready? Good deal. First section of that question was, what can we do as homeowners associations to attract or increase the home values of our homes, our neighborhoods, things of that nature, correct? Yes. So, one of the biggest things I've noticed in the last couple of years being in the neighborhood that I'm in is taking a vested interest in your neighborhood. Obviously, you folks here are here because you're, for the most part of an HOA, and you've all, through whatever means, taken a vested interest in your community. Well, that's well and good. Not all neighborhoods in town are like that. When you have people that care about their neighbors, care about their own property, maintaining it, not only maintaining it, but making sure the riffraff stay out. People come through and literally work our neighborhoods in teams to steal things. It's a huge problem. I've been in my house 5 years. I've been robbed 3 times. Immense issue. People hear about that when they want to move into those neighborhoods and they don't want to move in. We have to get that under control. We have to have that stop happening. It cannot continue to happen. The more it happens, the less folks want to move in. Simple concept. Sorry, I get a little agitated with that. Now, on our home values again, maintenance. We have HOAs, we have, some of us have covenants, some of us don't have covenants. All the same, keeping a vigilant eye on things and working with our neighbors. If there's something that comes up that's a problem that's maybe not necessarily one house's issue, working in conjunction with your neighbors to take care of, may it be water issues or whatever else may be coming up. My folks' neighborhood where we lived, which is down on Arnold long ago, there was an issue with water behind our houses that would soak every house on the whole street when it rained terribly. So we had to work together as a neighborhood with the businesses behind us to reroute the water that came down St. Albert's Hill and washed out everyone's basements if we had a terrible rain. There hasn't been problems in years because it got taken care of. To get on to the second part of our multiple point question, what can the city council do to attract new businesses? Not only attract new businesses, but we need to be supportive of those businesses that are currently here. I don't know about any of you guys, but if you've tried to open a business or do something in Council Bluffs, there's lots of red tape, there's lots of permits. I think it's been alluded to before. We need to cut down on some of that and replace some of that old language with new. As it comes to jobs, we need to get jobs, yes, that pay good, high money, but at the same time, $40,000 jobs would be fine. You know, when Griffin Pike closed down, you got to figure how many folks lost a $40,000 to $60,000 to $70,000 a year job. If you live in Council Bluffs, especially on that part of town, there's housing that is close, you can afford on those wages. That's what we need to bring back into town first. And the other will come as we fill in.
Time's up, Joe.
I know, sorry.
I'm guessing that most of you will need the whole 3 minutes and then 3 minutes of the next question because you've touched on it. So question number 2, derelict properties are a source of distress for property owners and a source of crime in otherwise safe neighborhoods. These properties are not only eyesores, but the properties are also unsafe for the tenants inhabiting them. These derelict properties hurt the owner-occupied homes near them in value. This problem is beginning to be cleaned up through the recently adopted rental inspection program. We have heard that some of you are running for city council in order to repeal the rental inspection program or to weaken it, so there is effectively no independent oversight or code enforcement. Question 1, first part, if elected or re-elected, would you vote to maintain the current rental inspection program? Would you vote to repeal the current inspection program? Or would you vote to strengthen the current rental inspection program? Nate?
Well, along with Sharon White, I wrote it, and there have been attempts, particularly in the first 2 years when when we were both on the minority on many votes, 3 votes the other way. There were significant attempts to weaken the rental inspection program. Not only did we go to active rental inspections, but we listened to landlords and what they were already self-attesting to themselves under penalty of perjury was several things that frankly were impossible, like literally having plumb walls in your basement. So we made over 24, nearly all the changes that most landlords brought to us to make the standards more reasonable in writing, so they matched reality. But at the same time, we wanted something in place to make certain that everyone was following the rules, because we ran into a lot of tenants in a lot of neighborhoods, I know mine included, where people were getting taken advantage of by people who lived very far away in very nice houses, nowhere near problems they were creating. The vast majority of landlords are good, some are not, and we all know it in this room. And at the end of the day, no, I would never vote to repeal it. I think it ought to be strengthened. I've spent the last 4 years keeping it from being repealed, and I have great doubt that if the council were to turn over significantly, that it would remain. And I say that based on comments that have been made by individuals themselves. When you look at that situation, I think it ought to be strengthened. I think you ought to continue. I think that's one of the best things, the thing of which I am most proud in my time. Whether I continue on the council after 2 weeks from now or not, that is the thing that I will always, no matter how long I serve on council, whether it's 8 years or 12, that I will always be proud of, and I hope it sticks around. The final thing I'll mention with my time left is I'm glad that 2 things were brought up that I do want to piggyback in my remaining time about. The first is the ConAgra property. I drove the hard bargain with ConAgra on behalf and with the great assistance of the Gibraltar neighborhood to make certain that not only would it be improved to great standards, which to ConAgra's great credit, they agreed to, but I drove a hard bargain and made it so that they had to maintain it, or anyone else who would acquire that property in perpetuity, that is forever, so that when trees or other items may die in a year, they have to be replaced within the same growing season. So if it dies in January, obviously I don't expect them to replace it then, but it's now written, it runs with the land, so to speak. I put that in there. As to the neighborhood on College Road, I disagree, but the neighborhood was strongly against it being there. I thought it was a good thing to be in there. It was housing that was going to be in the $40,000 a year earning salary range. I helped the neighborhood work through in their strategy against it, even though I was for it. A lot of them are against me in this election, unfortunately, but I think they ought to remember that I helped them do that because they were organizing together, they asked for my help, I gave it, and I have no regrets. That's the type of council member you need.
Nate, this is still for you.
Oh, okay.
This is the second part of the question.
Yes, ma'am.
Will you allow the enforcement of the rental inspection program to proceed without interference from the city council on behalf of landlords cited for code violations or cited for other rental inspection infractions?
Yes, I've continued to do that. It's been done under 3-2 votes in the current council. I have great fears, as I've said, that it will flip the other way if significant turnover. So I listen with interest to see if we'll get a firm commitment this evening from the challengers whether they would repeal it. I've heard some, in previous forums, I've heard some generalized statements, but I've not heard a direct answer. I've given one, I hope they give one too.
Chad, would you like me to reread the question?
I think I got it.
Perfect.
Thank you. I'll probably just combine my 2 into a 3-minute section. I'm not as an eloquent speaker, I don't believe. First part of that, maintain, repeal, improve. This is a new piece of legislation. I think we need to see it run its course for a little bit longer before making any sort of decision-making, whether to maintain, repeal, or improve. So mark me down for the maintain. Very interested to see how the housing stock continues to improve. I would agree with that statement. I think that the housing stock is improving. I'm not interested in repealing. One of the things that I have talked to landlords about is what is it like to be on the other side of the inspection? There's 2 sides. There's the business owner or the landlord side, and then there's the tenant side, and both are equally important. And I think the only complaint that I've heard is that, landlords most of them have a federal or a more streamlined approach of an inspection, and the city inspection, it isn't. But it's also new, and I think that's the thing that we have to keep in mind. When anything is new, it takes some time to get used to. And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this is going to continue to improve the housing stock, and like I said, mark me down for the maintain. I think that in general, this is something that is definitely worth monitoring, and I have no interest in repealing it. I think that it is quite important to our community, especially in a community where 70% of the housing stock is built before 1978. That's important. The enforcement piece, no. I think what's important for me is folks are in these jobs, the inspectors and in the building department, they're there to do a job. It's not the city council's job to babysit them. I think the only thing that we can expect is fair and consistent treatment of all landlords. And that would be my expectation as city councilman, is fair and equal treatment of everyone. And I have no reason to believe that's not happening today. I would wholly expect as a taxpayer that it is happening, but that would be, in my opinion, the level of involvement of a city council member. I don't believe that the city council should be stepping into the day-to-day operations of how these inspections are taken care of.
Well, as Nate said, we worked numerous hours putting that together. We met with an incredible amount of people, landlords, neighborhoods, to write that legislation, and I'm in full support of it and would always be in support of it. If there are areas where it needs to be strengthened, I'm always open to listening to that. I have always advocated for safe and decent housing, but if there's something that's missing there, I'm always open to hear what that is, to see if there's anything else we need to do. I think we're starting to see a difference. I think it's working. We are now in the first year of the second 3-year cycle. So all of the landlords have been through an inspection once. They'll be heading into their next 3-year cycle. So I know that there was a lot of concern when it passed, and rightfully so. Change is not easy. But I've actually been approached by landlords since who have told me that it actually is fine. It's not as bad as they thought it was going to be, and it seems to be working fine. So I will always support that and would never vote to weaken it or repeal it.
Can you repeat the second part?
Yes. Will you allow the enforcement of the rental inspection program to proceed without interference from the city council on behalf of landlords cited for code violations or cited for other rental inspection infractions?
Okay. Well, for sure, always open to the improvement of any of our policies throughout the city council, throughout the city. Strengthen, maintain, repeal, it's for sure doing a job that's needed in this community. Being a landlord myself, I've gone through one of the inspections. I thought it was very fair. I have 4 properties, three rental properties. They're all registered. The thing about it is we need to work with the landlords to make it better, to make it more efficient. You know, our inspectors do a good job. I talked with one of the landlords. I thought it was an interesting concept that she brought up, to take one of these rental houses that's vacant and send each of our inspectors in one at a time and see what they find, and come out and send landlords that want to participate in and see what they find, and then compare notes. See if our inspectors are all finding the same things, see if the landlords are looking for the same things, and then reevaluate on what we're all looking for and make sure that if you get this inspector or that inspector, or if it's this house or that house, that it's all uniform for everybody. I think that'd be good. You know, I think it's an essential part of our community. We have a lot of rental properties, and I would definitely maintain it and improve on it. We need to improve on everything we're doing.
So the first section of that question, the current inspection program, maintain, strengthen, or repeal. I would say strengthen, but because I think there's room for improvement, I see that as an improvement, maybe not the way everyone else does. I do think we need to work in partnership with the landlords. I do think that there's tweaks that need to be made. Some things, again, this is a relatively new program. It does serve its purpose to an extent, keeping folks safe, but sometimes it gets a little bit overreaching into people's rights when it comes to who's renting. You know, if you are a rental person and you rent, they can come in and say this, that, or the other, and necessarily might not be the same as someone that's an owner-occupied property. Which again, it's a work in progress. It's, again, I'd be willing to strengthen it. I see that as a weakness or a flaw right now. As well, I would like to see landlords be able to, again, meet with the inspectors, go through each house, you know, what do we have that we don't see eye to eye on, to work together. Ultimately, the problem comes up that if there's many things that need done, some not necessarily as important as others, sometimes those costs are incurred, and it makes it hard for a landlord to keep rents the same, which then in turn makes it hard to allow folks to rent. The average income in town is not that high, yet rent seems to be awfully high. Now, if more fees come through, that's going to spiral everything back up. And again, I get we have to have everything be safe, 100%, I'm on board with that. And I think it's done some great things for some properties that need to be fixed. I was out yesterday and met with a gentleman on a section of town, and there's a house we discussed that is a definite problem. They have been ticketed numerous times, it doesn't seem to do much. Those obviously properties like that are what's causing problems for everyone. You know, I'd like to believe for the most part, a good number of the folks in town that have rentals are good folks and are trying to do a good thing. They're trying to provide housing for folks in town that are of their means. But, again, we have the bad sour apples that come in and cause problems for all of us. So, these programs have to be in place. If time and money were no object, everyone obviously would have pristine properties for the simple fact that they want the property value to be up so that they can offload them in their retirement. But that's not always the case. So again, I would say strengthen. Would I get in the way of enforcement? No. City Council makes the laws, let everyone else inspect them. It's a separation of the branches.
I too would definitely support maintaining the rental inspection process until it gets through this next cycle, and then I think you need to do a full review. If anything, I would probably support strengthening it. I too met with several rental property owners. They had one suggestion because they also have Section 8, and those require a regular inspection as well, and that sometimes it's difficult to coordinate that inspection along with the city inspection, and you do have to have your renters open and available for that inspection process, so that just adds that much more effort on their part. rental housing is a small business, and we want to make certain that we support them. And yet, I think it's important that we make certain that we have quality housing and that it is safe housing. The comment that I heard from these individuals, though, that they too felt that it was a good practice. They said, there's really only a couple of us that are the bad apples, and it's giving pain for the rest of us, and it's also an image. Once again, I credit Council Bluffs. I credit the council that passed all of this. It was a lot of work. It was very controversial, but Omaha is facing the same thing right now, and we already have ours in place. So I credit the leadership of the council that put that in place against that kind of resistance. As far as enforcement, I agree, council, we should support our inspectors. But that's their job. I don't think the council should get into the nitty-gritty efforts of enforcement, but support those that are inspecting.
This next question will start with Mr. Hannon. So this question came directly from my neighborhood. Council Bluffs history and historic neighborhoods are one of its biggest strengths. You cannot build history, and Council Bluffs has it. Recently, the FP&A learned of a proposed development within the Park Glen Historic District and worked with a developer and the City Council to ensure this new construction would adhere to Federal Secretary of Interior standards for historic preservation. This was agreed to on a meeting here at the library on July 22nd, 2019, resolution number 19-144. This is again a two-part question. First, if elected or re-elected, would you enforce the current agreement regarding the development of those parcels in the Park and Glen Avenues Historic District as adopted in resolution number 19-144? Or will you allow the developer to seek variances and build outside the scope of what has already been agreed to? That's the first part.
Okay.
The second part is, do you support adopting the process utilized in other Iowa communities whereby developers are asked to seek a meeting with affected neighborhood groups in advance of approaching the City Council with a proposal so that the neighborhoods have influence at the beginning rather than at the end of the process?
Question, or the first part of that, would I enforce it? Absolutely. So I believe this is Yoder Construction that is...
That is correct.
Okay, yeah, so that was something I followed with great interest as it happened. First of all, I think it's wonderful. How do you keep the cohesive nature of your neighborhood with what was really vacant land, right? And so I think this is a great win, not only for the neighborhood, but a great win for the community, because I really feel it sets the tone for an opportunity that's going to present itself multiple times over in our community as it continues to age. So yes, I do support the current resolution. I would not support any variance, especially because everybody's already met and agreed upon the plan, which leads me into part two. One of the things that I think most of us up here, but also in this room, feel strongly about is building a stronger community. And that starts you can't have a strong community if you don't have strong neighborhoods. So if you could start that process in building or growing upon your strong neighborhood at the onset before construction or renovations are done, I think that sets the tone for your neighborhood and for the folks that are going to live there in a manner that will keep a lot of the people that already live there and have made significant investments in their homes and their neighborhoods. It helps preserve that investment. And I think, Sharon, you made the comment, you're probably not going to realize all of the investment that you made in your home. But that investment's there, and it deserves to be protected. So if you can work together, which is kind of the theme of what I'm trying to communicate throughout this entire campaign. This community is better when we work together. And whether that's in a neighborhood or a community at large, and it requires vision, but more than anything, it requires the ability to listen. And so while you may not always be on the winning side of an equation or anything like that, I think as long as you hear people out and give people a fair opportunity to speak their piece, I think we're more likely to walk away from a conversation in a much more positive manner. So yes, I do support the resolution, and I absolutely support a collaboration as it relates to renovations and reconstruction of new homes in existing neighborhoods.
Yes, and I actually want to thank your neighborhood association for working with that developer to come up with that plan. I think we're all aware of the properties that have been infilled into our historic neighborhoods that they're sore thumbs. They don't match anything in the neighborhood. There was no attempt to try. There's currently one being built on Locust Lodge that's very similar. It's a brand new ranch home and a neighborhood is historic homes. I think that there are no ordinances to stop that from happening. But when you have a strong neighborhood association, as you do, and you get involved, I'm very much in favor of that. I'd like to see actually a lot more of that. I've really pushed since I've been on council to try to get the vacant lots in neighborhoods back on the tax rolls. But they need to go back on the tax rolls with similar properties, properties that fit into their neighborhood. And I think that as long as the expectations of a neighborhood are reasonable, and they were very reasonable, I will always support that. Of course, there's that fine line, and we know that with our historic neighborhoods, you're not supposed to try to imitate, you're supposed to try to fit in. So I always encourage that, I will always support that.
So, enforce the current agreement, resolution 19-144, absolutely. As far as you talked about other communities where they involve the neighborhood associations, I'm not familiar with the ones that you're talking about, but absolutely the neighborhood should be involved. I mean, as we talked about on some of the other questions, the neighbors that are around you are the most important people. They take care, they keep an eye out for your neighbors. When I'm out walking the baby at night, I knocked on the door of a gentleman the other night, his garage door was open, it was 10 o'clock at night. And his dogs were barking, he came out, looking at me like, what in the heck are you doing? But, you look out for your neighborhoods, you look out for the people in it, and we're all neighbors, and it's Council Bluffs, it's a great community. The Yoder construction project up on Park Avenue is directly across the street from one of the houses that I own. I own 410 Park Avenue, it was the first house I ever bought. It's definitely not historic. I don't think it fits in the neighborhood. It was foreclosed when I bought it. I lived in it for 2 years. Put a lot of money into it and restored the inside. It doesn't look like some of the historic houses that are up there, but nonetheless, it is a property that is not foreclosed on. It's on the tax rolls now. So I would definitely involve in the neighborhoods. I don't know exactly the process where the neighborhood should be involved as far as beginning, middle, end, but they definitely need to be involved.
Okay, first part of the question, would you enforce the agreed upon plan? For the most part, yeah. I mean, I don't see why if everyone's in agreement, then of course, obviously, and at the same time, it is super nice to see repurposing of empty lots, returning things to the tax roll. An empty lot doesn't really draw in much tax income, and as we all know, our budgets are tight at home and as a city. To your second part of the question, should we involve neighborhoods in the discussion early on before it gets to council? Yes. I would lose my mind if someone tried to build something behind my house, like a plant of some sort. I 100% agree. And at that point, nothing's set in stone. It is a great time, and it's a great idea, a great opportunity to get the input of all those affected. Now, at the same time, I understand people have property rights, I get that. But when things come into town or come into a neighborhood and they don't match, it can draw everyone's property values down. Much like they did in the downtown section of the Hunter Block, they built buildings, not, again, as stated earlier, not necessarily to be exactly the same carbon copies, but to fit in and be likened to, so it made for a clean new transition. That has gone extremely well. It looks great down there. If we could repurpose more sections of town, there's many vacant lots in Council Bluffs, and there's many properties that are 6 months away from being vacant, or should be, you know. That is a large thing in my mind. Get everything back on the tax roll. There's no point in maintaining a property that is defunct. It's dangerous. If the city owns it, we're then liable. We self-insure to a certain extent. Let's get it back into the hands of someone that's going to repurpose it, much like they're doing in the park neighborhoods. So.
I don't have much more to add other than yes, I support the current plan and I wouldn't have that change. And yes, as far as having the neighborhoods involved early on, I think that's only a win-win from the beginning. I do want to commend you too, having attended all of those council meetings, and there were several meetings where this was discussed, whether it was delay from the developer or just getting back in touch with individuals. The neighborhood association, you were looking for the win-win for both sides. You approached it in a very cooperative manner. You made it very clear that you wanted them there, that you were willing to work toward a good plan. And I think that, you know, that's what the neighborhood associations have to keep in mind, is that it's not a black and white yes or no. It's like we have to find common ground. We need to get these properties back on the tax rolls, and that we have to be able to work together. And I want to commend that neighborhood association, because I saw it time and time again, even when there were a few delays, but you kept coming back and having good suggestions and good conversation. So hats off to you for that.
Well, I appreciate the question. I brokered the compromise between the neighborhood, and I told them some hard truths about not being able, and they were receptive to not being able to get entirely everything they wanted. And indeed, those individuals, some of my colleagues on the council who were worried about something happening no matter what, I had to get them to realize that it also mattered that an existing historic neighborhood, a designated one by the the Department of the Interior, as a National Register of Historic Place designation, could lose it. And that mattered a great deal to the neighborhood. So brokering that compromise, I was able to eventually get unanimity on the council to pass it. So I would hope that that would not be repealed. As for notifying the neighbors before a matter gets to council, all the current members of the council supported my policy to do it. So it's actually our current policy now. So all three of us up here currently on the council supported that. I did want to take with my remaining time, because I think that really leads to the ultimate question, what to me is the ultimate issue in this campaign. When you speak of neighborhoods involvement, you're speaking of the voice of citizens, the voice of everyone who ought to be at the table being heard. And I think that's vitally important. Having grown up in the neighborhoods movement in our community, and that's really the only reason I ran for council, was to further that effort, frankly, I really think it involves people working together. It involves us looking out for the greater good, the good of our community, not ourselves. And so that's one reason why when the pay goes up $4,800 the start of January, if I'm reelected, and I'm glad to hear Deb Bass and Sharon White have both indicated they would as well, donate $5,000 a year towards neighborhood grants, so that the neighborhoods such as yours, Michelle, can continue to do your vital work. And in fact, we've teamed up, the three of us, for that issue and for one other issue. There's been a lot of negativity in the race. And again, I learned in my neighborhood work that you don't say things about people that you wouldn't say to their face. And when even when your friends are, no, actually, especially when your friends are saying bad things about other people, you call them on it, especially if it's on your Facebook page. And so I was disappointed that so many folks don't see that as their obligation to correct mistruths, including about me, that somehow I'm a crook or not in this for the right reasons. You know, at the end of the day, I'm up here for community service, and I learned all that in the neighborhoods. I want to give that money back to the neighborhoods. I think that what I learned there ought to be learned by all of the candidates, particularly those who ought to have their friends stop spreading lies about the rest of us. And because I think the neighborhood should give us an example that I hope in the rest of this campaign we all follow.
Thank you. I'm going to step out of turn for just a minute because we're going to go on into something here that's kind of relative to what we've just spoken about. So zoning matters arise in the Council Bluffs downtown core and in the neighborhoods and districts from time to time. The position of city council member is an elected position, as are zoning and planning commission seats, I believe. In the past, citizens have engaged in the process of petitioning the city council for zoning changes directly affecting their neighborhoods. For example, a neighborhood collected well in excess the number of petition signatures needed to secure a zoning change from residential 3 to residential 1-2. And additionally, the number of signatures collected also represented an overwhelming majority of neighborhood citizens as well. However, the city council at that time ignored the request of both the majority of the citizens and of the successful petition process. This is our question, and we'll start with you, Sharon. If elected or re-elected, will you be a representative of the citizens and honor the petition process and neighborhood-led engagement, or will you override local neighborhood consensus and majority opinion in favor of absentee or minority special interests or your own views?
So the downzoning issue or the right zoning issue is not.
Right zoning, yes.
Right zoning issue. It's something that I'm open to looking at, but there's always a little bit more to the story. So I wasn't on the council at the time, but I try to stay up on this. In my business, zoning is very important to the value of property. If you have a property that's located in a zoning that it makes it non-conforming, it affects your value, it affects your ability to get financing. So, and there are original double houses that are historic, so I like the R1, R2. I think it keeps those original historic properties from becoming non-conforming. And I think when a neighborhood has gotten together and this is what they want for their neighborhood, we need to try to bring along some of the existing properties that would be financially affected and see if we can't get some consensus there. So no, I'm not going to vote against the neighborhood. I'm going to listen to everybody. But at the same time, I do have to listen to everybody, and that includes the people who now their property is going to be non-conforming. What I'd like to do is find some changes, and that's something that Nate and I have talked about, is how can we change some of our zoning ordinances, some of our building codes to address the historic neighborhoods, because you're faced with a little bit different situation than a newer neighborhood. So there's got to be ways that we can do it where it's not going to financially impact your ability to get a loan if you happen to already own a property, but it would keep more from being made, more properties from being cut up into multifamily properties and destroying those historic homes. So I think there's a balance. I think we need to find where's that happy medium, what can we change that wouldn't negatively impact an existing property owner with an investment, but to keep it from happening again and to encourage the conversion of those back into single-family homes at the time that the person who owns it at that time sells it.
So zoning is an interesting question. You know, we have to look at all angles for the community as well. You know, the person that wants to come in or has applied for that zoning to make it the right zone, to rise or downgrade it. You know, I own a house that's a residential property that's a non-conforming use that's in an industrial zone, and you know, understanding the non-conforming use, if it's damaged more than 50%, I can't rebuild that home. So it's an interesting concept. You know, we have to look at what makes sense for the whole community, including the neighborhood that is surrounding and rezoning it. So there's no right answer to this. Everything is a case-to-case basis. As Joe stated earlier, on the back of his yard, I believe, is a cornfield currently. And so if you look at something going in there that's gonna go into a neighborhood that doesn't fit, then that's something that the council has to look at.
So as to your question, would I be a representative of the citizens or a representative of minority or special interest? I would have to say all of us up here are here to be voices of the citizens, or at least we attest to be. It definitely would be something you want to listen to everyone. Again, like I said before, I would lose my mind if someone tried to put in something crazy behind my house. I get that, 100%. You know, so minority or special interest, it all becomes, again, a case-by-case issue with regard to you. I mean, obviously we have to regard people's property rights again, that's the law, but obviously those affected, as I said before, with the, you know, discussion before things come to pass is when it's easiest, before anything has been set in stone or been, you know, predetermined. So that's what I had.
Well, for the most part, I'm very supportive of zoning. You do, as Sharon said, it's very important to property value. We've talked about how our property values in Council Bluffs don't equal to Omaha. Well, they have very strong zoning laws over there. So, you know, you do believe, you listen to citizens, you listen to their requests, and as a council member, you have to make tough decisions. And in the end, you're looking out for the best of the good. And I would also say that for the greatest number. I would also say I've been attending the planning commissions also since May, and I've seen some great discussions there about the zoning questions. And I think that the city has a good process in place for these kinds of decisions where individuals can come and their voices can be heard, and yet in the end, a decision has to be made and then it has to be upheld. Just a great example was the First Avenue corridor that mixed commercial use zoning was just passed. And to be there, to hear that discussion, to hear the two sides, the pros, the cons, the concerns, I think that planning commission did a great job, and then it was supported by the council. So you always want to be listening. Everyone needs to be heard and their thoughts considered. And yet, if you're talking about protecting your property values, zoning is important.
All of lawmaking is compromise. You try to find, and I know that's become a dirty word in our country today, unfortunately. It's always, I have to win, you have to lose, or vice versa. And, you know, I hope at the very least on a local level we don't get to that. We've gotten that way as a country, and that's a comment against both parties, frankly. And I'm sick of it, and I don't want it here in our local government. And so, laws are about you have a great amount of ability to do what you desire with your property, but as a society you have to give up some rights so that we have civilization and not complete chaos. Or frankly, you'd never be able to get anywhere. Can you imagine trying to get across town? You'd have to ask the permission of 60 different landowners to cross. So you've got to have public ways. You've got to have the rules of the road, quite literally, so that we don't run into each other all the time just to get somewhere every time we try to go someplace. So you don't have an absolute right to do whatever you want with your property, nor does the government have an absolute right to tell you everything you have to do with your property. So it's a balancing act. I do believe in zoning. I think you've got to have ground rules. I don't think if you, again, most of us, me included, your only investment that you afford is your house, right? So if you buy a house and somebody puts a rendering plant next door, you might be a bit aggrieved, right? It might be a little hard to sell. So it makes sense that things be where they ought to be. Now in neighborhoods, I've generally been in favor of reasonable right zoning. By that I mean, for example, take the neighborhood you mentioned, and I'm quite familiar with it. I lived there at the time and still do, Fairmount Park. It wasn't called that yet, and Michelle and I hadn't created it, but it's what we now call Fairmount Park and neighborhood. And there was a proposal that was not to have R1 zoning all the way down to the Ogden Plaza and the other commercial, but had steps, as zoning ought to. From commercial at R3, which is the most dense zoning at the time. Now we have R4 in some places, like Underblock, but R3 and then R2 and then R1, that gets smaller and smaller. R1 is single family, basically, detached single family. And so it makes sense that we ought to find, and I genuinely think in that neighborhood, among others, we can find a compromise that will work, that will disadvantage the least number of businesses, but also take into account the significant desires and needs of the residents who live there, because their voice matters just as much. We often make zoning changes for big business. We sometimes make it for small business, but we very seldom seem to be in support of doing it for neighbors. And I really believe that we ought to be doing more of that. And reasons why the Dundees of the world have higher values, one of the bigger reasons is 2 generations ago, around the time I was born, so I'll give my age away, in the late 70s, they did right zone appropriately. And that's why they're ahead of us, to be really honest with you. I want us to catch up with that piece. We have a lot of things we're ahead in. We're not ahead in that.
So my special interest is the 62,000 people that live in this town. There is no special interest that's going to guide me more than the people of this community. That's why I'm running. I like to believe that's why we're all running. We all deeply care about this community. However, I will not be bought. I will not have special interest that drives me. It is not who I am as a person, and it is who I will never be as a person. In this specific example, I'm not as entirely familiar with it as some others, but I really do believe, again, it goes back to what I said earlier, it's about listening. You listen to the neighborhood. You listen to how it's going to impact them, and you weigh the facts, right? You make sure that the facts are represented, and that everybody's everyone's on the same page. But at the end of the day, you have to make a decision that's best for all involved. And if you keep the lines of communication open, I really truly believe that you can bring multiple people from different points of views and put them in a situation where we can all air our grievances and find a reasonable resolution that will work for everybody. Not everything has to be a conflict. That's probably the thing that frustrates me the most. While we may not agree on everything, not everything has to be controversial, not everything has to be a conflict. We can agree to disagree while being agreeable. And I do believe in revisionist history in this example, I would hope that we could bring everyone to the table and find a resolution that would work for everybody.
Thank you. So this is the final question of the evening. This will start with you, Roger. The City of Council Bluffs has a great park system, and the city has invested a lot of money in creating parks that attract children to them. Some of these include the construction of playgrounds, splash pads, athletic fields, and a skate park. Unfortunately, these parks were constructed to attract children and young people, have become infested with drug crime, violent crime, and are frequently unsafe for anyone, let alone children and young people. For example, a neighbor's dog was stabbed in broad daylight while being walked. My son was robbed of his skateboard at the skate park 8 days after he got it, in broad daylight. Drug paraphernalia litters the picnic areas and parking lots. Neighbors have walked up on drug deals taking place and fortunately were able to leave the park unharmed. Our question is, if elected or re-elected, will you support the City of Council Bluffs paying for the purchase and installation of public video surveillance cameras, much like the one that caught the bobcat up at the splash pad? This is in order to protect children and youth by deterring crime in our parks, while helping the police and victims to identify offenders. And will you support the city paying for the purchase and installation of appropriate lighting for the hours when the parks are open after dark? Let me preface that in saying that most of the parks are open until 11 o'clock at night. Even in the summertime, it's dark by 9:30. And so there is, speaking specifically of the skate park, there's one light, and it's off to the west end of the park. Speaking of Kern Park, there's one light to the south of the stadium, and those run at 50% power at best. So again, it makes it difficult for people to walk their dog, say at 9 o'clock at night. In the heat of the summer, that's probably the best time to walk, or early mornings. Yeah, so let's go with that.
Well, I appreciate you bringing it up. You know, we know it's a problem. The city of council knows it's a problem, you know, the drug and homeless problem here in our community. We have to address it, and we are. There's been a task force that has met. There's a pilot program going on with small business owners, the providers here in the community, as well as the council's police. So with supporting paying for it, obviously we have a lot of things to pay for, including roads and different things. So we have to, as a council member, we evaluate the budget and see what we can afford and what we can afford each year. And that you know, I'm sorry to hear about what happened to your son. That's not good. That's actually terrible. You know, as a council member, and actually as any member of the public, you can do ride-alongs with the Castle Bluffs Police Department and the county sheriffs. I've done ride-alongs with both, and we've gone up to Fairmount Park and to these parks, and we've caught people that are there when they're not supposed to be. Some of them are innocent and just sitting there. They didn't know it was closed, so they say. And then there's some that are out there causing trouble. And the Council Police Department does a good job of evaluating that and keeping the community as safe as possible. I do think, you know, you bringing that up is something we can definitely look at. As a city council member, we can talk with the mayor and talk with Public Works and Vincent, the director of Parks, for us and take a look at that. So it's definitely something that, obviously, especially with your experience that you had, that we need to evaluate.
Sharon, do you need one?
It's still sealed. It's still sealed. So, okay. To the first part of your question, would I support public funding of cameras on the city parks? Yes. And lighting? Yes. Now, more importantly, to get to the issues that are underlying here, I got a message from my aunt actually a few days ago, and she said, Joe, if you get a chance, you need to bring up, of all places, the skate park. There needs to be surveillance, there needs to be lighting. Her granddaughter would be my cousin's daughter, hangs out there, her friends hang out there, there's problems there. Obviously, that's someone in the community that happens to be, again, directly related to me that it affects. There is big problems in this community with the drug use and things of that nature. As stated earlier, last week I was at a meeting at the police station with a group of folks in town that are attempting to curtail some of that, working with, sorry if I steal the police chief's thunder in a few weeks, but trying to roll a program out to work with local business owners and eventually the local neighborhood associations and then the providers. It's a large and many-headed problem, this vagrancy and drug use and things of that nature. It also encompasses, to some extent, you know, unchecked mental health issues, things of that nature. Homelessness in general is, in all honesty, irrelevant to what actually is happening. The issue and what we've discussed in these meetings with the police is that the problem is the activity. Whether or not someone has a place to put their head at night isn't necessarily as big of the problem as their actions in their activities when they're out and about into the world. And so what our hope is that we can curtail that activity that's causing the issue. Obviously, we want to have everyone to have a roof over their head and food in their bellies, and you know, we're all good Christian folks and you know, want the best for everyone. But the real problem has become, and in our discussion, has been the illegal activities. Again, the drug use and the alcohol consumption and I think in your email it said something about the tenting in public parks. that stuff can't happen. Those aren't what those places are for. You know, what the idea and hope is that with this program being rolled out, people will be more aware, hey, we need to contact the car officers and they can come deal with it if those folks don't move on. Real quick on back to the cameras and lighting, LED lights are cheap. They last for about 1,000 years. We gotta be able to figure a way to better light things. I keep the lights on at my house now because I've had issues with theft and such. People don't like to be seen. When the lights are on, they don't like to steal stuff. They might get caught. And when they know there's cameras there, there's an even bigger chance. So, I gotta go. But yes, cameras, lights, 100%.
I had met with Vincent Martinello shortly after he started, but I touched base with him again this past week, talking about this specific topic. First of all, he said there are a number of cameras that are in place, but like most of us, including at my house, they're just a camera that's not connected to anything, just to try to scare people away. But so he said they're doing an assessment of all the cameras to see which ones are actually functional versus which ones are there to attempt to scare the bad guys away. So he said that is almost completed. He said they're very aware of 5 areas where they, and he has ordered the cameras, and then they also need to get them connected to a server because those that were working only were connected to SIM cards, so it was just a very limited amount of time that they had to investigate a crime, and then they weren't able to access that. And these cameras are prosecution ready and justified for use when prosecuting criminals. So he mentioned the 5 specific areas: Fairmont, Overlook, River's Edge Pavilion, and the Upper Deck. They've had problems there. Bayless Park, Lewis and Clark Monument, Kern Grandstand and Entrance. And then he said Kimball Park and the skate park they're still looking at exactly what's going to be the priority of those 7, but those are the areas that they have identified that definitely they're going to be installing some additional security cameras. He said lighting has been a tough one because when you light an area, the neighbors sometimes don't like the light. So there's always that ongoing debate of how much is enough and how much is too much. And he said if you light a park late at night or all night, you will have people there. So what is the time that you want to decide when the lights will go off? And if they do go off, do you still want a certain amount on? The skate park in particular, he talked about because of where that's located, drivers can be distracted coming down that bridge. So he said, you know, it sounds like a very simple task to put up lights, but he said you'd be amazed at how difficult it can be. And so he said we're actually using a lighting consultant to help us figure some of this out. And so he said we're working on it. We agree completely. The work orders have been signed to replace these old cameras, and that, you know, he said, but we're going to need some input, particularly from the neighbors in those areas, about how much light, how long, and you know, whether or not it's working, and always be open to making changes. As far as the homelessness, I too have been attending those task force meetings. Sorry.
With regard to lighting, we currently are actually in a 10-year plan to, and with the parks, I'll be more quick than that, I had hastened to add, but a 10-year plan to replace, to have Mid-American replace all of our lighting in town with LEDs. I myself went to LEDs in the fall of 2009. They're a little bit cheaper now, trust me. But everything down to the light in the refrigerator. So, to try to set a good example. But, so we could have done it all at once, but to do that all at once would have come with a massive bill from Mid-American that you would have had to pay for. So I agree we need to prioritize more quickly in the parks. Deb Bass mentions a lot of good reasons how it's not as easy as you might think. That's true of a lot of government. But with regard to the issue of homelessness, I think we have to be very careful. And in my day job I work in my business, we call that housing insecurity and food insecurity, right? That's what it's called among the professionals trying to solve the problem. And you're never going to completely solve it. I'd be lying to you if I said, and you know that, we all know that. But what we try to do to help poor folks who are terribly down on their luck involves 4 things. The first is leveraging by giving money to the local groups who are really good at it, the Micah Houses of the world, and so forth. We do that, actually, as a city government. Every year we vote to, and I've never voted against any of that, and I've always voted to increase that. Secondly, it's partnering with the schools. We do that where we can, but again, the schools are a separate form of government, so we don't control the schools. But making certain that individuals realize the full value of their potential young, so that hopefully that they won't end up in those straits later. That doesn't solve everything, but it certainly helps. Third, the biggest problem, it seems to me, is that the state, in an interest to score political points, cut a lot of mental health services for people, and we have to deal with the aftermath. So I think we all, and I have, and I encourage anyone else who hasn't, to continue to contact our state legislators and the governor's office to try to increase the mental health funding, because that is the biggest issue. And fourth, I believe we all have an individual duty, whether you want to, as I do phrase it in my faith background, but I would not refer to an individual simply because they're poor as riffraff. What I would say is individuals who are down on their luck aren't necessarily criminals. Sometimes they're just trying to find food to eat. There are plenty of criminals who have a lot of money, trust me. We all know them. Or know of them anyway. So in any event, I think we have to be really careful not to malign a whole group of people, especially in the campaign for political points. At the end of the day, we do have problems, but they're not problems that they can be overcome. I really think we have to work together, though, and have solutions. And those 4 things I mentioned are the true solutions. We all have a part to play.
Lighting and cameras. So these are 2 things I have quite a bit of experience with, being the supply chain manager at Ameristar. So I know a thing or 2 about surveillance. I just need to get a laugh out of someone. Stop sitting up here. It's not always as simple as putting cameras up. As was mentioned, they may not operate. So you have the original purchase, you have the maintenance of the cameras, and where's it going to go? For example, a switch, which is what sends the video feed to the DVR that records the feed, runs about $8,000. So there's an expense to this, right? And so using my background in purchasing, I would expect myself on the city council to make sure that we're making fiscally responsible decisions. There is a lot that has to be paid for. The budget is tight, and I believe that the city is doing the absolute best that they can. However, we need to find ways to eliminate occurrences, or at least minimize occurrences like what happened to your son. So yeah, I don't think anybody would be against more lights or more cameras, but there's a cost and there's a strong complexity to cameras in itself. I think the right solution would probably be a phased approach, which it sounds like is in effect right now. Now, even though you set a phased plan, you may have to change that if crime begins to move its way around the parks. And I think that is something that we have to do. We have to be flexible. We have to be able to go target the skate park, if you will, and make sure that the right cameras are in the right place. And I'm not a huge fan of hiring consultants. They're usually very expensive, and you may not always enjoy the product that you get. But the problem is, I don't believe there are very many experts employed by the city right now in surveillance. So we're probably going to have to bring in somebody that will help us make sure there aren't blind spots. There's a cost to all of this, but I think if a strategy is put together, or the strategy that is put together is continued, and maybe revised as we implement these things, we can see improvement. We have to continue to provide the resources necessary for not only the Parks Department to manage their parks, but for the police department to enact the laws that they are expected to enact. This is not an easy question to answer. I believe that a couple little tweaks here or there will make a big difference, and now I'm getting nervous again. They'll make a big difference. It's not your fault. I'm not holding you personally responsible. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so anyways, I wanted to see this.
It's not your fault.
So yeah, we've had problems at different parks, and it does change from time to time which parks are having more problems. Our neighborhood association bought a camera for the Black Angel because we had big concerns. There were people there that didn't need to be there after closing. The nice part about that camera is it talks to you and tells you, I'm taking a picture of you. And I think that we need to see a little bit more of that, because if anybody who's had to try to identify somebody on a security camera, and if you don't know who they are, having a picture of them, unless somebody identifies them later, is not terribly helpful. Rarely do you get the license plate on camera. I think it has to be a mixed approach, and I would like to see us get a little more creative about it, especially with cameras that talk to the people and it's motion censored, to try to make them realize, you know, uh-oh, we better get out of here. Our pavilion has gotten severely vandalized, and to a great amount of money to repair the glass panels and many other things down there. There's a city I just read about that is using, they have a pavilion much like that, and they're having problems with vagrants and vandalism, and they decided to put the Baby Shark song on repetition and play over and over at night, and they have had very good luck with that. So, I think there can be, you know, a lot of different approaches, and I think we can learn a lot from other communities and what they've found to be effective. I'm sure we wouldn't want to do it very often. There are people that live down there. They would hate us if we did that every night. But I think that you can definitely find some creative solutions. Lighting, again, is difficult. We do get complaints from neighbors, especially when it's a sports field going in or a large park. They're concerned that those floodlights light up their backyard. They can't sleep at night. So yeah, it's not always that simple, but I know that we're working on it. I know that we're trying to do the best we can to fund some of those things. But again, I'm hoping that the neighborhood grants, when a neighborhood is having a problem that can't be addressed immediately, by donating and having neighborhood grants, I think our neighborhood used those grants to buy the camera for the Black Angel. Again, these are things that neighborhoods do for our community every day, and I don't think people realize the contributions and what we can do when we work together.
I think that's the end. So I wanted to add a little bit of a trailer to this. Again, Fairmount Park Neighborhood Association and the Gibraltar Neighborhood Association got together and pooled funds to put one of those cameras up at Kern Park. And again, we had the same problem that you were speaking of. The camera stopped working and no one was monitoring it. I think the biggest problem at that point in time was people driving on the track. And so there was a lot of vandalism up there, and that's kind of where we're coming from on this. I wonder about putting cameras on other buildings. So perhaps, is it the Black Hills building across from the skate park that I'm thinking of? Perhaps they could have a camera. They already have cameras in place. Maybe it could be pointed at the skate park. Just a thought. So we were supposed to be done by 8 o'clock. We had this pretty well regulated, but we are a bit tardy. If anyone has any questions for a specific city council person, would you please request to meet with them and get it taken care of? Again, this is nothing about Broadway medians or anything else that's already been done, decided, or anything like that. I appreciate everyone coming this evening. There's still bottled water back there. That coffee is decaf, you guys. And I can tell you, I'm not very good at making it in a percolator like that. It may be either hair curling or need a little help as far as that goes. So, yes, you may.
Tell people who you are.
My name is Brian Jack Holder. Sorry, I won't talk so loud. A lot of people in here know me. I run for Congress 3 times. I'm running again next year. If anyone wants to sign my petition, I need to get 375 signatures before next March to file my papers to run for the 4th time, just to represent everybody. I'm a member of the Libertarian Party of Iowa. But I'm also a citizen journalist, so I film debates and forums and legislative coffees. This will be on my YouTube channel, and that's Brian Jack Holder. And I'm going to go home tonight and edit this and have it uploaded. Film at 11 for anyone that wants to watch it. And then I also took some photos of the candidates here, and I'll be giving those to the candidates to use for whatever purposes they want. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming out here tonight. And feel free to share the video once I get it uploaded.
Thank you, Brian. I would echo that. Thank you. Oh,
I just wondered, we had a lot of extra absentee ballots left from our canvassing, and so I didn't want them to go to waste, so I brought them down. If anybody needs one, they have to be turned into the courthouse by 5 o'clock on Friday. But if you do need one, they're over there, and they have instructions on what has to be done and when they have to be turned in.
and if you aren't a registered voter, the circulation desk is where you can head next. That library is open until 9 o'clock. We are reserved in this room until 8:30. I'm guessing they won't kick us out, but at 9 they will. So again, thank you everyone for coming this evening. I think it was great.